Visiting a city for the first time and not sure what to do? A walking tour is a great place to start. Top Dog Tours is in Boston, Toronto, Philadelphia, and New York City. To book a walking tour, you can visit us at topdogtours.com and be sure to check out our social media accounts for offers and discounts. Hi, this is Nicole Kelly, and this is She Brew in the City, and I have my first interview after quite a long break, so I'm really excited about this and this guest in particular. Today, I am talking to Netta Asner-Minster, and she is a Jewish educator and influencer, and I've been following her for quite some time, and I was just talking before we started about how I'm so excited about this interview because I get to actually talk to her instead of just watching her videos. So how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. I'm after a good night's sleep. I have a 4.5-month-old who, thank God, is now, sleeping at night. So
I'm jealous of that. My daughter didn't really start sleeping through the night until she was like 18 months old and going to bed at a decent time.
No. So she doesn't sleep through the night. She went through her regression, and she wakes up in the middle of the night, but she gives me, more time than before.
That's good. I'm jealous. So like I was saying before we started, you are my first international guest. Netta is talking to us from Jerusalem. So she's my first guest who is in Israel and my first international guest. So I'm really excited to talk to her. So kind of just jumping in, you were not born in Israel. So where were you born and what was your religious upbringing like before you made Aliyah and moved to Israel?
So I was born in Silver Spring, Maryland. That's where I grew up until I was 8 years old. And I grew up non-Orthodox, but my parents themselves are not so as observant as I am today. So we also went to a conservative synagogue, but it was one of those conservative synagogues that were borderline non-Orthodox, meaning that it was mixed seating, but they wouldn't have women participate in services, or they wouldn't have a female rabbi. They actually had an Orthodox rabbi in the conservative shul. But that is also what kind of started my Jewish journey, because through being in that shul and being able to be in a mixed seating, as a female young kid, I was able to lead prayers in the shul. So that was very meaningful to me.
I've never heard of such a thing like an Orthodox rabbi at a conservative synagogue. It's so interesting. I grew up going to a conservative synagogue, but I feel like having since moved to New York, everyth's a little bit different on the coast. What's considered conservative here is closer to like Orthodox, modern Orthodox, where at home it's a little more lenient, it's a little more liberal. So it's just so interesting to hear about, like, I don't want to say denominations, I don't know if that's even the correct term, but the different like types of Judaism and how it influenced people.
That synagogue is just one of a kind. It's like many are very different nowadays, but yes.
Yeah. I've learned that synagogues sometimes operate so differently, they almost feel like a different denomination of Judaism. Because like I'll talk to people who grew up in other conservative synagogues, and it was like a very different experience for them.
Yes.
So that's one of the things I love talking about with people is kind of their specific journey growing up. Mm-hmm. So you said you were 8 when you moved to Israel. So what inspired your family to make Aliyah? And did this change the observancy or how observant your family was?
So basically what brought us to make Aliyah is that my mom is Israeli. And so the story is that she actually went to the States because she was older and hadn't got married yet. And basically, went to change location. There's a Hebrew saying, Mishaneh Makom, Mishaneh Mazal, which means you're changing your luck by changing the location. So that's exactly what she did. And she met my dad. And she always wanted to come back to Israel and had family and does have family here. And my father, who is even older, his parents passed away and his mother passed away when I was in 2nd grade. So it just kind of made sense, that timeline. But it was always in the cards that we were going to make Aliyah. It just happened to be that it was, 8 years after I was born, and my youngest brother was 2 at the time. I have one brother, but my youngest sibling, basically. And our observance did change because we didn't really have the option or variety of synagogues around us in the same way. In the neighborhood we went to, the synagogue was a little bit more observant. It was Orthodox. It was not modern Orthodox. But the schools we went to were a little bit more open. So I mean, it didn't change. It changed our observance level by the way we actually practiced. But in the home, we stayed, the way we were beforehand. But yeah, definitely our observance outside the house was a little bit different, a little bit more Orthodox, just because those were the options around us.
Is your mom from Jerusalem, or is she from a different part of Israel?
She's from Jerusalem, yeah.
Oh, that's nice that she was able to kind of go back to her hometown and bring her family with her.
Yeah.
Had you visited before you made Aliyah?
No.
So it was your first time going. That's crazy.
Yeah. So throughout that 8 years that we were in Maryland, my mom was having a kid every year and a half. So it was just a lot, the idea of flying to Israel. And because there was always a plan to be going to Israel, we knew we would just end up there. Yeah.
How did you feel about making the big move? I moved across the country when I was in my late 20s and I was married, and I feel like it was difficult. So I can't imagine moving at such a young age to a completely different country with, obviously being Jewish, you felt welcomed, but, a very different culture and lifestyle.
It's funny because I think that I was just at the age where, on one hand, I'm able to still grasp, the culture. I'm not too old, but at the same time, I've always been American and Israeli. It took me a long time to embrace that. When I was in high school, I would only answer people in Hebrew. I was very adamant that I'm Israeli. But then, growing up, and I think we'll get there later on, but I ended up being in positions and jobs where I was constantly using my English. And here, I've married a guy who's completely American. But I've embraced both sides of me, but it took me a long time to realize that I am American and also Israeli. So I guess that was, something that I took. And the change, well, we were speaking about it for so long, it was difficult. And also difficult socially, to be honest, but it was a young enough age that I was able to really fit in. And the big bonus was that I had my mom who spoke Hebrew, so I really learned Hebrew very quickly. To the point that I'll never forget, in my first year, the teacher who was supposed to teach us, she was on maternity leave, and when she got back, she did not know that I made Aliyah. I did not know Hebrew well at all when we first moved. So, so that goes to show that, that it was an okay transition regarding just culture-wise and language. It was just later on other things that I had to embrace about, being part of both worlds.
Yeah, it's funny because I was literally just talking about this last night. There is a young lady, she's 20, who won the freestyle wrestling at the Olympics for America, but she identifies as American Israeli. And this is something I hear a lot more from, people and see online, that there's people who either were born in Israel and live in America, or vice versa, or they have an Israeli parent. So I think it's an interesting identity that's morphed that I really like. So you talked about being modern Orthodox. Can you classify what that means? I live in a building with a lot of modern Orthodox people, so I feel like I could maybe touch on that. But being modern Orthodox, I think for my listeners, it would clarify a couple things if you explained exactly what that was.
For sure. I will also say that for every person, it's very different. That a lot of these things are self-identification, stuff like that. So I'll just say in general, how I see it, and that's how I identify myself as this, is that religiously, I am Orthodox. I follow Jewish law, and it's very important to me. I keep fully Shabbat and kosher and the laws of, family purity and whatever, the holidays and etc. But what differentiates me from somebody who's, let's say, ultra-Orthodox is that I am also aware and exposed to the modern world. I'm now talking to you on a podcast. I use my computer. I use my phone. I'm on Instagram. I'm aware of, pop culture, and I know who Taylor Swift is, okay? So, and when I'm listening to music, I'm listening to pop music and the popular music rather than a shiur by a rabbi. So, and another thing is that, yes, I follow Jewish law, but if you see me, I am not covering fully my hair, and I'm aware that the ideal is that I would cover my hair, and that's something that I would wish that I will get to someday, but I don't, really feel comfortable about that right now personally. And that's also something that makes me modern Orthodox, is that, that I choose this, and I'm okay with it rather than putting a wig on or fully covering my hair and everything. So that's kind of how, I differentiate, or what it means for me to be modern Orthodox.
Interesting. I like the autonomy of that. This is what I want to do, especially when it comes to covering hair. If you could talk a little bit about that, because you're the expert about why Orthodox women cover their hair. And I've also noticed that a lot of what we would consider modern Orthodox women, they've been they wear headbands or like head coverings to some extent. And I know that you do that. Can you explain kind of the thought process behind that?
Sure. So the Jewish law so first of all, married women are supposed to cover their hair. That's first and foremost. So it's a sign that a woman is married. And according to the Jewish text, you have to cover your hair. Okay, so there's two opinions of what that means. It's either all your hair. That's what's important. So that sometimes you'll see people wrapping their hair, so you can see it's like in a ponytail or something like that, but they wrapped their hair to some extent, or that it's their head. So they'll cover the top of their head with their hat, with a scarf of some kind, but you'll see hair flowing down. So those are two opinions. That's what you're supposed to do. Now, I want to say like in the 19th century or something like that, in the modern era, there were rabbis who came out who said, this really isn't a mark of, this really isn't something that you need for modesty, because even women who are modest in general, they don't cover their hair, and it's not considered something immodest that a married woman is not covering her hair. So if that's what's common in your community and that's where you live and people don't cover their hair necessarily, then you can do that. You don't have to cover your hair. And then there's a lot of backlash with that, but still those opinions have stayed. So that's why you have people who, let's say, will wear a headband or something of the sort that's just symbolic on their head, just so that I am married and that I have something different compared to somebody who's not married, but at the same time I am not completely following the Jewish law. And I will say that the explanation sometimes people give is that I live in a community and society that people don't really cover their hair in general, and that makes, me stand out, or that makes me actually, like, here, if you're wearing this, like, very beautiful way, that can be maybe even not so modest, because people won't necessarily know that it's a wig. Yeah. Which, funny story, my husband, who was not Jewish beforehand, his friends actually went to, like, a supermarket and really thought that that it wasn't a wig, let's put it that way. And I was like, this is defeating the purpose.
Yeah, that's so interesting that you brought that up, because my husband had a conversation with this about somebody a couple of years ago about, like, for me, my hair is a mess always. Like, it looks the best when someone does it professionally. So if I chose to cover my hair with a wig, it would probably look better, which I think is like counterproductive to the idea a little bit. So it's such an interesting topic to me, because I didn't grow up, in a family that covered their heads or were around women who did that. So I think I'm just fascinated by the personal choices that married women make.
Yes.
You talked also about being modest. Can you talk a little bit about how being an Orthodox woman affects the way that you dress personally? I know, like you said, it's different for everybody, but for you personally, what that means.
Sure. I just want to add to the beforehand that I'll say Sfaradim, and specifically there's a known rabbi from the 20th century, Rabbi Ovadia Yosef, who actually say that you're not supposed to wear a wig. So you'll see a lot of Sephardic women wear hats.
Okay.
Because they exactly say that the wig is going against that. So usually women who wear wigs are Ashkenazi and also Hasidic as well. So about the modesty. So for me, so I'll say when I first met John, I would wear more cleavage a little bit, and not having to do with him. That's just how I was beforehand.
Yeah.
And I would wear skirts or, jeans or shorts. Shorts, whatever, that were above my knee. And now I don't do that. So meaning I make sure that even though I'm wearing short sleeves and I will wear pants, that's because, when I'm talking about society today, I find that, people don't look at pants and are like, wow, that's, not modest. So I'll choose wisely what pants I'll wear. I don't wear shorts. I don't wear something that's, very, very tight. That's not what I would wear, but I will wear pants. And I wear, things that are beyond my knee in that case, whether it's a skirt or a dress. And also I won't wear anything that doesn't have sleeves. And always be covered. So yes, like what I wear looks normal to somebody seeing me walking around. It doesn't look like out of the ordinary. I'm wearing a very long skirt or long sleeves when it's boiling outside. But I changed personally, and I'm mindful of what I buy. Like my mother-in-law wanted to get me a shirt and it had an open back. I said, no, I'm not going to wear that. So I do have to think twice before getting something.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. You talked about pants. Correct me if I'm wrong, but doesn't the rule with that have to do with, I think I might be completely wrong and we're going to edit this, have to do with like cross-dressing, like wearing clothing belonging to the other sex, and that's why religious women don't wear pants? Is that where that comes from?
So there's two things. You're correct. That in the Torah it says that, you're completely correct. That in the Torah it says that a woman and a man should not wear like the other's clothing. And so from that, they say a pant is a man's clothing, and therefore you shouldn't wear pants. Now, at the same time, you can say, but it's now women's clothing, so you can wear that. But the thing is that here somebody pointed out to me, or a very close friend who's more Orthodox than me, she was saying, when you wear jeans, they're very tight and they show the shape of the leg, or they show the shape of a woman's, of a butt also, and that's not modest. And honestly, I can see that and understand that. And again, going back to what we were talking about with the head covering, it depends what community you're in. If you're in a really Orthodox community that nobody's wearing pants and you're wearing these very tight jeans, then you'll stick out like a sore thumb. You'll be very obvious. But if you live in a community that it's mixed and you have a variety of people, if you're wearing normal jeans and not something that's like shorts or whatever, or you're wearing pants that are a little bit more wide, then that could be considered modest. And that's how I see it personally. But so it's those two things together. Also the idea of not wearing a man's clothing, but also the fact that some jeans are really, not modest. If according to, those standards that you go by in that case.
Gotcha. So jumping back a little bit, so being, as you identify as an American and an Israeli, do you celebrate American holidays along with Jewish holidays, like, for example, Thanksgiving or 4th of July, or I don't know, does Israel, I'm sure, has Mother's Day, but is it the same day as American Mother's Day? So how does that work in your family?
So growing up, so I'm talking about the Asner family, we didn't really do that. And I think also I think it was because my mom is Israeli. So all these holidays were kind of foreign to her, and it wasn't super important to my dad. But now in the Minster family, it's very important. And so is the holiday of, Super Bowl, as well as football and stuff like that. And I now know so much about, Green Bay Packers and the Lions, because those are my husband's teams. I hope I haven't made people mad right now.
I know American sports teams can be very divisive. It's kind of like cult-like.
Exactly. So I'll say in our family, then it is very much celebrated. We do a Thanksgiving meal, and we in fact live in a very American neighborhood. So you have to order a turkey. They don't sell it in the store. Yeah. And they know the store nearby. They're like, oh, you need a turkey, and it's like they're enormous. I don't know where they get them from, where these Israeli turkeys are from, but they know
They
like end
import
of
them.
November or whatever.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
Thanksgiving was never a big thing in my personal family growing up, but my husband's family, Thanksgiving is huge. But I always felt like it's because Passover was a huge event in my family. My great aunt would have 40 people over. It was like she'd bring someone in to wash dishes. It was like the Super Bowl of holidays. So I feel like Passover became more impressive. And now it's just me and my family and a couple non-Jewish friends at Passover. And I'm kind of I miss that. I had to write a screenplay treatment for a class I'm taking, and they were talking about the ideal meal because it's a food and film class, and I described a Passover meal where everybody important in my life, dead and alive, had come back. So clearly, Pesach is a very important holiday for me, and I'm excited as my daughter gets older to hopefully expand that to
How
her
old is
friends
she?
and their family. She's 3. She's 3. She's so funny. We were at like a Tot Shabbat the other day, and I guess I wasn't covering my eyes good enough to say the blessing over the candle. She's like, "Mommy, eyes." So we're teaching her like very early. She knows she can't say the prayers completely yet, but she knows the deal. And she was like, "You are not covering your eyes, Mommy." So
sounds like mine. She points out when my husband or my dad don't have their kippah on. She's like, "Kippah."
Yeah. I know. Well, they're such like rule followers, and then. Yes. Half the time, and then the other half, they do whatever they want. It's a fun age. So, kind of continuing with growing up, did you have a bat mitzvah?
Yeah, so I did have a bat mitzvah, and actually, this goes to the Jewish journey, unique situation type of person and family that we are, that it was an Orthodox bat mitzvah and everything, but I also went to like a feminist high school growing up. And I read Torah and from an actual scroll, which is pretty unique. And there was a whole ceremony surrounding my bat mitzvah, rather than just it being a party with me saying a few words. It became something that was very thought out. That my mom and aunt did a song together, and I joined them in the song. And another aunt, did a poem for me, and there were various speeches and a Dvar Torah and reading Torah. And it wasn't part of a Shabbat service. It was during the week, but I added much more to it. And it definitely was innovative compared to what other people were doing at the time, and especially within an Orthodox school.
It's so interesting, kind of the history, I guess you could say, of bat mitzvahs, because coming from a conservative synagogue that like my family had basically helped found, I had, older second cousins who they basically do like the prayer over the candles at a Friday night service, and that was it. And then I was the first woman on either side of my family to read from the Torah and have an actual bat mitzvah. And I didn't really realize that until my husband asked me. He was like, "Wow, that was kind of a big deal." And then I had mentioned, we had talked about like when we were talking about the interview themes, and you're like, "I didn't know that there were themes to bat mitzvahs."
No, I didn't. I was thinking about. I was an Israeli emissary in a conservative synagogue, and I guess, I don't know, maybe I never noticed before or whatever, but I never noticed that the bat mitzvah had themes. Maybe I just it went over my head because I wasn't expecting it, but yeah.
It's a whole thing. It becomes like, I'm very interested in the history of this and want to do further research. At some point, I think in the mid 80s, it went from being like, let's have a nice kiddush, grandpa, does the blessing over the challah and we have some wine, to like a $500,000 party on the Upper West Side. So I don't know. I'm just fascinated by it. And people spend obscene amounts of money. Like some of these party planners I follow on Instagram, they're showing these bar and bat mitzvahs. And I'm just like, that's a down payment on a house, a very nice house.
Wow. And also, I'm wondering also how that affects people in the class, socially, whatever, because you're creating all this pressure of you have to do a crazy party in order to be cool.
It's a thing.
Yeah.
There's this big thing that like fancy parties were at night, so you'd do the service and then there'd be like a break and you'd go away, and like the girls would get their hair done and they'd have like a night party. But of course, night parties are more expensive, and my mom was always like, "I want to save money to spend on your wedding," because nobody sits around and talks about their bat mitzvahs. And I say this almost every episode, jokes on her. I sit around and talk about my bat mitzvah all the time with people. So, but yeah, no, it's so interesting. Even just also like weddings are so different in other countries. I see a lot of pictures from weddings in Israel, and it's this beautiful kind of, we come together outside under the chuppah, and it's just a nice party, where in America it becomes this insane thing. So I'm just obsessed with kind of the celebratory differences.
I'll just say awesome about weddings for a second that I was shocked that it's not just a wedding. Like, you're talking about the differences of the wedding itself, but you have l'chaim and an engagement party, because you have also, the Jewish stuff, and also like a bachelorette and whatever you call it, like a bachelor party.
And bridal showers.
Right,
which,
exactly. Everything. Yeah. So you do also like the American things that are common and the Jewish stuff too. And just like you end up with doing, 10 parties for one wedding.
Yeah. A lot of people, they'll do like actual trips for bachelorette parties. It's very popular in like Nashville in America is like the bachelorette destination of the country. And, these people are expected to pay thousands of dollars to go on a trip to support their friend, where it's like, we just went to a bar for mine. But it's a big deal for a lot of people. I feel like it's just capitalism at its its finest, but it's become kind of a normal thing, I guess. I don't know. I feel like we had a really, really nice wedding, but all those parties leading up to it, like, we didn't go crazy. So
Good.
I think my husband had a pretty epic bachelor party, but he didn't get all the other parties that I got, so it makes sense. So you're living in Israel, and a big part of living in Israel in your late teens is serving in the IDF.
Yeah.
So can you talk to me a little bit about, when people serve in the IDF, the requirements, when you don't have to, and what you did exactly when you were in the IDF?
Sure. So I'll just say that military service is mandatory in Israel. However, there are various people and ways that you don't have to serve. I'll say, for example, like Israeli Arabs are exempt, for example, just because of, conflict of interest or stuff like that. I don't want people to get, have issues with that. So they do volunteer, but it has to be volunteer. Then you have people who are also physically and mentally not able to serve in the army, because the basic requirements that you have to be able to use a weapon and be able to guard a base. So even if you're not actively using it, every person gets training to actually know how to use it. So if, for example, you, God forbid, have epilepsy, and then you can't hold a weapon in that case, so you're going to be exempt from doing the army. Another last group is people who are religious. So this is politically.
Yes, this is what I wanted to touch on. There's a big. I feel like in the past 2 years I've kind of been following a lot of Israeli news, and I know a decent amount about the politics. I know this is a big source of conflict.
Yes.
In the country.
So this is specifically for ultra-Orthodox men, that they are studying Torah and then not going to serve in the army. And then you have religious women who can just say, I'm a religious woman, and then they don't serve. However, it's become common that they do national service instead. So most people are okay with that, because if you're going instead to work in an orphanage and with, at-risk youth, or at a hospital or stuff like that, then people are, more accepted and okay with that. I will say that I originally thought I was going to do national service because I had a dream that I wanted to be a national service girl who would inspire, a Jewish community in America the same way that I was inspired by two women who came from Israel when I was still in Maryland. I decided to join the army because I was inspired by somebody else who, this is actually a great story, that she is not technically halachically Jewish, meaning her dad was Jewish and her mom was Muslim. And she said, I can't wait to go serve in the army. I'm super Zionist, I'm super Israeli, but I'm not recognized or seen as Jewish. And I said, wow, she is so passionate, excited to be in the army. I have no reason that I shouldn't be going to the army, rather than I just wanted to do something. So it's like that minute I heard her, I said, I'm going into the army. And that was it. So when other people were debating and, should I do national service or army or whatever, I was like, this is what I'm doing. That's it. And so the process is unique because you do two tests basically, and you get scores. Those scores determine what positions are open for you basically. And I got literally a text saying that, here are on this day there's, tests or whatever for the spokesperson's unit, and you're welcome to come. So I said, okay, let's go for it. And I passed the one test and then 2 interviews. I'll just say that there's a stigma regarding the spokesperson's unit that you have to have connections in order to get in. So I have been asked up until this day, who do I know and what connections did I have? And I was like, none. I didn't know anyone in the army.
On my own merit.
And I'll say that I think it changed. That it used to be more exclusive, and then they very much opened it up so that it was completely merit. I know a lot of people who really didn't have connections who were serving alongside with me. And then the specific position I got was just dependent on availability within the unit, and I worked with North American media. So that means like classic, media. Sometimes so newspaper, radio, TV. Not internet or not like random blogs and stuff like that, but really like a classic media. And then the reporters who were usually in Israel, that's who we would work with, because you can't just call up an IDF officer and ask for a brief or a question. you have to go through the spokesperson's unit to either, again, answer your questions about whatever happened, or to go to a drill or go to a base or speak to somebody or get information. So the idea or the goal was to be somebody who's to actually be making sure that the IDF's message was getting out there and initiating ideas to the reporters that were also relevant and interesting, and that they would be using our message in that case rather than writing on their own, and perhaps not being the most positive thing about Israel, which I think many people can agree is happening a lot recently.
Yeah.
But it's we do the job, and the idea is to prep and provide information to the reporters and have personal relationships so that when a war does break out, they have the information. But at the same time, when a war does break out, these outlets often send reporters who are not usually here. So those relationships that you have built and worked on and whatever sometimes are not as relevant anymore because they brought, a more known person to be here covering the war. So then that changes things. And on one hand, it's cool to be able to work with them. The other hand, you don't always get the best coverage for Israel.
I think that's part of the problem that's been going on since October, is that people who don't know what they're talking about or don't have any context of thousands of years of history, and they're just kind of inserting their personal beliefs on everything. But I like that type of unit exists. How old were you when you started this?
Oh, sorry, I shouldn't say what age. So you have to be minimum 18. So depending when you were born during the year, sometimes you really, or a lot of people do a preparatory year as well. So it has to be minimum 18. But people draft also older than that for sure, especially like people who made Aliyah and moved to Israel, so they'll draft in later on in their life. I was a little over 18, so I finished when I was a little over 20. So women go in for 2 years, men used to go in for 3 years. It has been shortened to 2 years and 8 months. It's supposed to be that for both men and women it is 2 years and 8 months. I don't know why they haven't extended it for women to be additional 8 months. It's easier to cut those 4 months for men, but they haven't extended it for women. So it's 2 years and then 2 years and 8 months.
And then usually people, if they want to, go to college after serving in the IDF?
I'm the odd person out who goes to university college right afterward. People usually do the trip, they work, they take their time, and then they start university. But I'll say that that's what makes people, first of all, it's 3 years here, not 4, and people are much more focused when they do start college. So I knew immediately I'm doing international relations and Jewish history, and that was, my degree was in that. So those 3 years that I studied, that's what I learned. So it's not, I'm learning a little bit of everything and then I'm going to choose my major. These are the subjects I am learning.
I like coming back as an older student. I think as an older student myself back in school, you do appreciate it more and you're more grounded. At America, it's such a thing that you start college immediately after high school. And I think a lot of children are unprepared and they don't know how to kind of take care of themselves or motivate themselves without a parental figure. And I think it's not always the best thing. But yeah. I know a gap year is common in other countries. That's not really a thing that Americans do, which I wish they did. I'll probably encourage my daughter to be like, take a gap year, work, go on a vacation. I think
to Israel. There's
people.
Great gap year programs.
Yeah, there's programs. Yeah. So you were also, I read that you were a tour guide at the Knesset. Was this through the IDF or was this something separate?
So it was a student job, actually. So there are various student jobs in Israel in general, and the idea is to really help you, push your career, while you're a student. And at the same time, you don't have to you do shifts or you do limited hours that will fit your student schedule. So I gave tours in English in the Knesset. So it will be a huge variety of groups. It could be, people who are getting a private tour, just random people who come and want a tour in English throughout the Knesset, a guest of someone. I've met very, cool people and groups through the year that I was working there.
So we're going to continue talking about education a little bit. So you are an educated, observant Jewish woman. And I know within certain denominations, this is something that is not encouraged to the point of even being frowned upon. Why do you think it is important for women who are observant to be educated and the benefits of that?
So I am very much somebody who believes, that knowledge is power. And I think that the more we look at the sources and the more we know, the more meaning we will find in everything that we do, and also have the agency and the ownership to ask questions. Because at the end of the day, when I was studying to be a Kala teacher, which means teaching family purity, the teacher said a beautiful thing is that, we are able to change, what is normal, and even like Jewish law specifically, if we ask the questions and present, the different facts and situations that we are put into. So yes, we might not be the authority in various things, but also we are becoming an authority. We are, asking the questions, presenting the situation, knowing the Jewish law in of itself to actually bring a change. So I think, the more we know, the more we can be involved and actively be aware of what Judaism actually is.
So let's kind of jump into your adult life. One of the things that you offer is services as a conversion consultant. What exactly does that mean?
Okay. So I'll say that I noticed that when I was speaking to a lot of people through my Instagram page, that people didn't realize what is the process of an Orthodox conversion. And I'll just say, and we might be going into this generally soon, but for an Orthodox conversion, you need a sponsor rabbi and need to have a Beit Din, a rabbinic council that is near you. So sometimes people didn't even know that. They were studying for years, reading books and learning and starting to practice various Jewish practices. And I would tell them, that's great. It's good that you are practicing and doing those things, but being a part of Judaism is actually being in a community, immersing, connecting to the rabbi and everything. So if you don't have that near you, one, you have to consider if conversion is for you, and two, you might have to move, or look into that and see what makes sense for you, or the various options and paths. So that is what a consultant means. That just giving all that information and sharing the options. So here I'll just give an example also, that sometimes women speak to me who are really interested in immersing further in their Jewish journey. However, their spouse is not. So, or they're not Jewish, or they are and just not observant. So then we talk through what the options could be. And it really depends on people's personal situation, their preference, what even they're practicing now. Sometimes people have a certain vision and not necessarily know what is required. So that's where the consult and consultation comes in, is really matching up the reality and the situation and the background to the particular person.
You mentioned Orthodox conversion. How does conversion differ within different types of Judaism? Because I know you can convert through my synagogue, which is Reform. You can convert through a conservative synagogue. So what is that? What is the differentiation between that?
So I'll first and foremost say that a big difference is who will recognize it. And an Orthodox conversion will be recognized by all denominations, whereas conservative will often recognize Reform, but sometimes not. And Reform and anyways, the Reform will recognize everything. Conservative will sometimes recognize Reform. Orthodoxy will only recognize Orthodox. And it becomes more complicated about who will recognize what. So that's one. And then the other is just what the process is and what the expectations are. So, Reform Judaism doesn't necessarily follow Jewish law, meaning that there isn't that obligation you have to do things, that things are offered as choice. So you can keep Shabbat, you can keep kosher, and we'll teach you what that looks like, but there's no obligation there in the same way that there is for conservative and Orthodoxy. So that's one. And then in conservative Judaism, there's also the concept of equal obligation, that both men and women are obligated. And that means that's why a woman could be a rabbi, a woman can lead services, etc. In Orthodoxy, there's the Jewish law is very much like you have to do this. This is you have to observe this, and also that way the process looks different. So for Reform and Conservative, you do it through the synagogue and the particular rabbi. So when you're doing a conservative or Reform conversion, like you said, you're doing it through your synagogue or a synagogue. Whereas in Orthodoxy, you can have a sponsor rabbi, you can go to a different shul, and the bet din could be in a different city. But you just have to put that all together. So meaning you have to find a sponsor rabbi who's saying, I am vouching for you, I am the person who will be with you when you go to the bet din. And in Orthodox conversion, you have usually 3 clear set meetings that will take you throughout the year, and a certain curriculum that you're supposed to be doing before each meeting. And it is a process. You're not expected to keep kosher immediately, but at a certain point you are supposed to, and you're really immersing in a community. But at the end of the day, I think I mentioned this before, the bet din are the one who sign your conversion certificate. Even though most of the time and most of your meaningful interactions will be with the community and with the sponsor rabbi. So even though you meet the rabbis only 3 times, they're the ones who really are important for the process and for the official conversion itself. I also want to say that in conservative and Reform, usually it is an entire year, and there will be some sort of meeting at the end of 3 rabbis, but it's usually the rabbis of the synagogue and people who they know. And in the end of all the processes, you'll immerse in the mikveh. And for men in conservative and Orthodox, I am not sure about Reform though, so maybe you can tell me, men will be required to do a circumcision also.
I think yes, and if they're already circumcised, they do a representational ceremony. Yeah. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure that's part of the process for Reform as well.
Okay. So I wasn't sure, because I know sometimes I have heard that they don't always immerse in a mikveh if there's no body of water nearby or something of the sort. So
that's so interesting. I Googled mikveh. The other night I was like, how many are in my neighborhood? There's 5 within a 5-mile radius. So it's so interesting. Possibly, it exists obviously, being in a community where there isn't a mikveh, because I'm from Los Angeles. I live in New York, very, Jewish and very large Orthodox population. So there not being a mikveh, but you can also for example, you could go to the ocean or something like that. Is that correct as well?
Yeah, you could, but if you were in an area that you weren't near a body of water and you didn't have a mikveh, so yeah,
be difficult.
So I am the conservative rabbi who I used to I worked with as an Israeli emissary. He said that sometimes they use a swimming pool, and those are conversions that conservative movement will not accept if they immerse in a swimming pool.
That seems more like a baptism than a mikveh.
Yes, but he said that it exists and it's happened before. So
that's very weird.
Yeah, I know. That's what I thought too. And I've met a lot of people who convert Reform and go to a mikveh, but it does exist. So that's why it's important to be aware, what each person's personal story is, because it really can affect, the trajectory of what you can do in the Jewish world.
So speaking of personal stories, let's kind of jump into your relationship with your husband, because this is one of the things that initially, your videos were popping up and it's oh, this is a really interesting story. So how did you meet your husband?
So my husband, now my husband, at the time obviously wasn't, his name is John. So he was on a trip with his college DePaul to Israel, and it was a trip that was more political, and the idea was to learn about the Israel-Palestinian conflict, and I was the Israel side. I was the Israeli student on a panel, and we met for, I think it was 3 hours, and then a few months later, I was heading to America for the first time after 14 years since we made Aliyah. And I was going to Maryland, obviously, because that's where I'm from. And at that time that I was going to be there was the APAC conference. So he was going there as well, because he learned about the Jewish world and how they love, non-Jews to be involved in various things. So he basically was able to get a ticket for free as a student who's also not Jewish and was interested in going. And I had a friend who worked at APAC and therefore also was able to get a ticket for free. And then we met there. And that's kind of when we started speaking with each other. And again, when we were speaking to each other, I was in Israel and he was in America. So
that's a long distance speaking to each other.
Exactly. So also, like, people are like, how did you start talking to him? Because I was like, why would I think I would develop feelings for somebody when he's anyways on the other side of the world? Like,
yeah, he's completely different side of the time zones are crazy. So for those that don't know what it is, can you explain what AIPAC is? They're in the news right now because there is a congresswoman who was, I don't know if you know about the Squad. Have you heard about the Squad?
Are you talking about Cori Bush? Is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
Okay.
So she was like yesterday, she was like, I'm going to get vengeance. And I was like, you couldn't even get reelected. How are you going to get vengeance? And she was like very anti-Semitic. But like for those listening who don't know what AIPAC is, can you just for a moment explain what AIPAC is?
I want to say it's the
I think it's American-Israel
like alliance.
Yeah.
And I'll just say that it is an organization that basically lobbies for Israel. So their primary role is to reach out to the congressmen and go to Capitol Hill and help with legislation to promote Israel. So obviously a lot of people who are involved are Jewish, but not necessarily, meaning any person who is pro-Israel can be a part of AIPAC and active, and that's the idea, is really supporting Israel and helping with the legislation for that.
So you talked about this being a very long distance relationship of any kind. How did this relationship start? Because you're on different, sides of the world. He's not Jewish. You obviously didn't see any sort of romantic connection happening because of that. So how did that progress?
So we were basically talking, and talking, I mean, texting and whatever. And I'll say that this is my personality, that I connect with people and I continue talking to them. I'm in touch with my childhood friend and we speak, once a month because that's what I do. So I did it not thinking, something would happen or anything. And then for whatever reason, John decided he was interested and continued to pursue. I will say that today he does not answer my texts. I'm joking.
Neither does my husband.
I am exaggerating. Yes, he's going to be like, I answer the phone. But I mean, he would like really, text and respond and whatever, and it's just hilarious, looking back at that now. So it started from just WhatsApp messages or Facebook messages, and we just started going to every possible platform, Snapchat, and watching movies together and everything. And all of a sudden, I was like, ooh, I think I have feelings for this person. And we were planning a trip that I was going to come visit him in August, and I just said I can't visit him because I have feelings, and or that I have to say, we are going to start a relationship, but he needs to be aware that conversion is involved, or that I have to say goodbye to this person because I can't continue pursuing this because my Jewish values and Jewish lifestyle is important to me. So I had a conversation. It was May 26, 2018. And
we remember the date.
Yeah. And I told him just that, and I told him that he would have to convert, and I was obviously very, nervous and awkward, whatever, because how do you say that to somebody? And his response was, I know. So,
wow.
I was shocked, but I just clearly speak about Judaism all the time and share my passion and whatever, that he caught on and even Googled beforehand what it would entail. And luckily, we were talking about before in the spokesperson's unit, a friend who served with me was from the community in Chicago where John was. That's where DePaul is located. And he connected us to the person who basically became his sponsor rabbi. And literally the following day, he emailed him. And, he pretty much had a very smooth conversion story, which is why it took me a while to realize that we were very lucky that his conversion was so smooth. But he was very blessed with a community and a rabbi, and that the head of the Beit Din went to the synagogue that he went to and saw him on a weekly basis there. So just the stars aligned and things worked out very well. But that's kind of how the relationship started. Whereas I told him flat out that the conversion process would need to be a part of it, and our relationship starting coincided with his conversion process. So we knew that at the end of it, we're getting married. So there was like a very weird feeling of speaking to somebody for 2 months and knowing that I'm marrying him. But it was mutual. We felt the same way. But I always tell people because of that, there are no rules in relationships. So, if you both agree on it and you both feel it, then, great.
I'm a big believer in the idea of beshert, and, that everything, even the things that have been happening in my life recently that are very difficult, happened for a reason.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think a month in, I knew I was going to marry my husband. I said it to my roommate, I called roommate, and she looked at me, I was like, I'm going to marry him. So I think sometimes you just know.
Right.
And there's a really beautiful story about my grandparents who were married for almost 50 years. They met when my grandmother was 15 and got married when she was 17 before she shipped out to World War II. It was like...
What?
Crazy. So like she, you know, it was the Great Depression. She was looking for a job, and she had her 2 younger siblings with her, and she's this 15-year-old, and walks into this soda shop where my grandfather was working because it belonged to his uncle, and she met him, and she walked out and was like, I'm going to marry that man. And my great uncle told this story at my grandfather's funeral. He said, and he started crying. He's like, and she did. Like, they just knew. Like, and their headstone literally says, oh, 1 in a million love affair. Like, I'm a big believer in that God has a way of bringing people together who need each other.
Yeah.
So I love hearing stories about other people who found each other in situations that, like, there probably should not have happened. Like your marriage.
I'll add that he is from northern Michigan. Which Traverse City. Nobody knows where that is unless
I worked with somebody. I was thinking about this when I was showering today, that I worked with somebody in my early 20s from Traverse City. So when you were like going Traverse City, I was like, that is the middle of nowhere.
That's what I say, but that's because you're from LA and New York, by the way.
Yeah.
John is like, it is actually a city, and they have everything there.
Yeah.
You know, it's not completely rural, but when I'm there, I feel that it is, because I'm very much a city girl. But, you know, like, if you told him or his parents that he would meet a girl from Jerusalem and marry her and convert to Orthodox Judaism, they would be like, what are you talking about? So it's not even from Chicago.
Anyone? Had he actually, before, I guess if he went to school in Chicago, had he grown up with anyone who was Jewish in Michigan?
So he remembers one time that a girl, you know, brought dreidels to school, like around Christmas time, to like share her traditions, but not really. The interesting thing, though, is that they did read Night by Elie Wiesel and The Diary of Anne Frank. And he also read this book that was about, I think it's called The Chosen or something.
Yes.
It's about an Orthodox person.
Yes. There's a movie with Robbie Benson. It's like a very 80s movie. It's actually pretty good. It's about like someone who I guess you would say was modern Orthodox, and he makes friends with someone who's Hasidic, and kind of their differences, and the guy who's Hasidic ends up, spoiler alert, ends up leaving the Hasidic community. It's a really beautiful story about a relationship between two friends.
Okay.
If you have, I know I just spoiled it, but like, it's a good book. I feel like it was given to me for like a Passover gift when I was like 11 or something, because that's
so
what my
funny.
great aunt did, is gave out
So
books.
he was like very confused with that whole book, because I feel like you have to understand those communities in order to really understand what's going on here. And he was like, went over his head completely. So he did read that, but that the trip to Israel really changed it for him, because then he read books he read The 6-Day War by Michael Oren, and he just really started connecting to the history, and then it was pretty much smooth into the religion as well, because he was searching for religion too and didn't really connect himself. His own family was they're Christian, but they never went to church, really didn't observe much, really weren't religious. So, it just, his desire of connecting to religion just happened to find itself in Judaism rather than his own, but it matched up for him specifically. Like, it made sense. So it all worked together, let's put it that way.
I've talked to quite a few converts, including one of our cantors, and he was always like, yeah, just always like, I had a Jewish soul. I just wasn't born into a Jewish family. And I think that's a beautiful way of thinking of it, is that you always felt a connection to this, but it took a couple steps to kind of get you to where you needed to be.
Exactly.
So speaking of your in-laws, I know you just took a big trip to America to visit them in Michigan. And as you said, they're not Jewish.
Right.
So the preparation for that, you shared a little bit of this on Instagram, must have been insane, because they don't keep kosher. They don't have a kosher kitchen. They're not Shabbat observant. So can you talk a little bit about the prep that went into that, as well as kind of the changes that had to be made in the household on Shabbat? And I don't think there were any holidays during that time, were they?
No, we purposely don't go when there's supposed to be a holiday, because
you need to go to shul. Yeah.
I mean, again, we don't have to, but ideally we would be in a community. It's very hard to observe specific things when you don't have any Jewish community around you. And specifically, there's the concept of, Eruv, which actually doesn't matter on holidays. But You cannot leave your like private domain. You need a string around the city or area you live so you can go, so it's a larger private domain, you can carry things within that domain.
Yes. Patrick, how much does New York spend to keep the string active?
It's over, I believe it's over 200,000.
Yeah, New York City spends about $200,000 to take care of that string.
Whoa.
Because we have a lot of at one point we thought it was like $1 million, but we looked it up, but it's
mostly maintained by Orthodox Jews, and different communities will donate money.
Oh, okay.
Towards that.
yeah. It's which, I don't know if you watched Unorthodox, but the big part of that in the beginning is like the string was down so she couldn't carry anything. And I was like, what is this? And I started like deep diving into it because, and it's, I don't know, like just like side note, like a lot of the modern Orthodox people in our building, it's so interesting because we live in a 17-story building.
Okay.
And they will get in the elevator, but they won't push the button.
Yeah.
And they'll ask me to push the button, and I tell them I can't do it because I'm Jewish.
Oh.
And then they'll have like, and they look at me like, how do you know that? I was like, because I just because I'm not very observant doesn't mean I'm not knowledgeable. And I kind of want to go be like, and you're not supposed to ask, and you're not supposed to. So it's just interesting, kind of like, talked about like the personal choice that things that people.
Yeah, I mean,
decide to do.
I was going to say, I thought, like, in Israel, you have an elevator that has a Shabbat mode that you can go in the elevator.
Yeah, there are Shabbat elevators
but, like, you'll
in
go
some
up and
buildings.
down. You don't need to press it.
Yeah, there are some buildings that have Shabbat elevators. There are hospitals and buildings that will have Shabbat doors. Our building has a door. We have a sliding door. We also have one you can open, but the elevator is not a Shabbat elevator.
Okay.
So, yes. So speaking of the, yes, talking about the $200,000 string. So, going
back to my in-laws.
To prep to your Michigan trip.
So I'll say that I think, and I try to explain this to people, I think it's all about respect and just awareness and knowledge. So we've gone there already for a few years, and we have our own dishes. So our own dishes are already waiting for us. So we don't need to do like a whole like koshering of huge pots and pans, whatever. And there's a lake right nearby, Lake Michigan, so we can just buy a new dish and put it in the lake, and it's kosher.
Can you explain why you have to do that for my listeners?
Oh.
Why you have to immerse dishes?
So you don't have to do it with every dish, like a plastic you don't need to, but if it is, I want to say ceramic, metal, and glass, and I have to check again. I might be incorrect, but definitely not plastic. So if you buy like a plastic spatula, you don't have to do it. But let's say you buy a bowl, a ceramic bowl. The idea of what is that it's like an old tradition that we still keep to today. That it used to be that dishes were made and used for idol worshiping, and therefore you immerse them to clean them. So it's obviously a symbolic thing. It's a spiritual thing that we still keep today, even though it's made in a factory. Nobody intended it for idol worshiping, but it's just before usage you immerse it. That's also a reason why some people will not do that today, just because they look into the raising and they're like, there's no need to do this today. But it's still custom and very common to do that. And often if you buy a dish in a Jewish store, it has already been immersed, so you don't have to do it yourself.
I did not know that. Interesting.
Yes. So it'll say it on the label that's already been toveled. That's the Hebrew word with the American accent added to it. So we have dishes, and then we just have an agreement regarding how do we use the appliances in the house. So my mother-in-law actually koshers the oven before we arrive, and they don't use the oven throughout our time there. And if they do use it, then they'll make something that's kosher. So whether it's a vegetable or whatever you're cooking, that is it's kosher, and they can eat it obviously, but they just have to use our dishes, and that the food itself is kosher. And we divide the burners, so we have 2 burners that are ours and 2 burners that are theirs. And then the microwave we double wrap. So the microwave is theirs, and we just like double wrap with plastic, and then you can use it and heat it. Which is, by the way, that's why plain food is wrapped a million times, because they're using the same heating space that also the non-kosher food is in, but they just wrap it a bunch of times, and that way it's insulated and quote-unquote protected, so it won't, it's still kosher. And in addition, we ship, this is a big thing, that we have to ship kosher meat and hard cheeses.
I saw that.
Yeah. So there's no place to buy like meat, chicken, fish. I'll add, if there is a Trader Joe's near where you live, you most likely have kosher meat, chicken, and fish in the Trader Joe's. But we don't have that in Traverse City. So we have to, order that in advance. But otherwise, like in the big store, Meijer, they have Kedem grape juice, and they have a bunch of Israeli items. They even have bamba there. I don't know why they have it. There's not that many people who are interested, but they do have it. And that's been always very, very helpful for us. And most items in America, thank God, are kosher. So it's not like many countries in Europe that you really are limited with the food itself that you can buy.
Yeah, traveling while you keep kosher, there's a lot of tips and things that I've seen. I can't imagine how difficult that must be in certain countries. Like, I can't imagine trying to go to Italy and keep kosher.
From the point of view that you're missing out, maybe. But
well, not missing out, just like where would you eat and like the logistics of that. Though, like a place like traveling to New York, there's like a lot of kosher restaurants,
right,
so it's not difficult. But if you're going, you're in Florence, I think your options are a little more limited.
Right.
So even cooking from home can be, as you mentioned, a little bit of a challenge.
I mean, yeah, if you're cooking from a house, you also take into account that you have to take time to kosher. So that means the first 24 hours you're not able to touch the appliances. You have to clean them first and wait, and only then you can kosher. So it is a process. But I'm saying we all, like, our in-laws respect it, and they are aware about it, and then that way, they basically prepare for us as well.
It's a lot of planning. I feel like all that planning on top of 2 children sounds like a lot.
Yes.
So let's kind of jump into your social media presence. What inspired you to start your Instagram page and use it as a way to educate people about Judaism?
So basically, my Instagram page was a COVID project. Some people did sourdough, some people did challah. I did challah as well. But basically, my Instagram page was a COVID project. And originally, I wanted to share about exactly what I spoke about in the previous question, which was, the unique situations and things we run into, being that John converted to Judaism, and with my in-laws not being Jewish, but that we're very, very close to them, and that they're completely a part of our lives, and we love them very much, and we're doing our best to, live, like to do visits and actually, spend time together properly. So that was the original idea of it, and then it became just Jewish education in general, and then also it was my platform and not with John, because he was not interested in social media whatsoever. He does things with me, and he allows me to film him, which I very much appreciate, but he's not actively doing it. And it was only a year later that somebody reached out to me, she's still my student today. She actually made Aliyah since I started teaching her. She reached out to me to actually learn Hebrew, and I was like, wait, people want to learn with me, and I can actually maybe make a little bit of money off of this too, that I have students and whatever. So when I had my first daughter, who's 2.5 now, I had 3 students, and now I gave birth again, about 4.5 months ago. So I have about 12 regular students, and since then I've had people who start, finish. I've had multiple consultations, spoke to over 120 people who have had done consultations for. So it really has become, a whole, a little side business and side gig but I didn't imagine that it would be that. I thought it would be just like me sharing about my life, and maybe, I would get a product here and there, or I would sponsor somebody, whatnot, I don't know. But it became, an opportunity to really touch people's lives personally in a beautiful way that I never thought that I would be able to do when I started it out.
What I like about your page is that there's a variety of different questions answered. Like you talked about circumcising children if they pass away before their bris. You talk about, shipping meat to Michigan. It's not just, this is my life and here I'm wearing, this is my dress. And a lot of observant Jewish influencers, I feel like it's a lot of that. And I like the area. I think we know who I'm talking about. I think
I actually thought of a few people, so.
My husband's giving me a face. But and that you do come with a Jewish education background. You have your master's, correct? You finished a little bit ago.
Yeah, exactly. It's actually, it's not funny. It's whatever. But I finished right before Sukkot. That's when I handed in my last project. Simchat Torah of last year was when the war started. So I was like, wow, I finished this degree in time, literally. Because if I wouldn't be able, first of all, I would have been delayed, and also I wouldn't have been able to like be in the mindset of doing that.
Yeah, of course.
So that's when I finished my master's in Jewish education. Yeah.
Congratulations on
Thank
that.
you.
I'm hoping to embark on that journey next year. I'm applying to grad school this month. So we'll see.
For what though?
I always laugh. I'm going to spend the rest of my life laughing for Holocaust and genocide studies. I think it's very important.
It's incredibly important. It's and you know, people who go on those trips, they talk about how extremely meaningful it is to actually see it and walk in these places, etc. So learning about it and sharing it is incredible. And I mean,
it was also really surprising because there's something, like my husband said to me, I'll never forget. Like, we went to Auschwitz and we had a private tour guide. And, you know, we're walking Poland. I don't know if you've ever been to Poland. Poland is very beautiful. So we're in the middle of this, like, we're in Auschwitz, but it's in the middle of this beautiful forest. And my husband's like, I finally understand, having come from these ghettos where people are starving and they haven't bathed, and they're in this beautiful forest and they're telling them that they're going to shower and that everything's going to be okay. He's like, I understand why they would have believed this.
Yeah.
So, like, there's a lot of things that I think we have questions about in regard to the Holocaust and the camps, that being there answers a lot of those questions, because you can study this, you can watch all the documentaries, but like being able to say, like, I was there, I saw that, I think it's so meaningful. And I tell all my guests on my regular shows, I'm like, go to Poland. First of all, it's very cheap. There's a lot of history if you're interested in the World War II. And, you know, I don't remember the exact statistics, but our tour guide was like, no one comes here to visit. And the fact that nobody does is, like, the numbers are so minuscule compared to other, I guess, like, I hate using the word attraction for a concentration camp, but like a historical site.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm trying to do. But
good luck.
Hopefully make that work. Anyways, so going back to social media.
Yeah.
A lot of influencers have talked about how they deal with anti-Semitism on a regular basis. And even I have like less than 500 followers. This is why I'm not on TikTok, because I feel like I posted a TikTok video and got deluged with a bunch of hatred. So I was like, we're not going to do that. How do you deal with that?
So first of all, I'm very blessed that I don't get it constantly compared to other people. But once a post becomes, you know, relatively viral, that it's reaching, you know, over, I don't know, let's say 20,000 views, because it happens whatever with posts. So I will not look at the comments anymore. I just don't. I have a post that recently went like very viral, like over 3 million people, and
oh wow! And
literally, I saw today a comment saying, the comments here are absolutely disgusting. It was about my mother mixing a spoon in like a non-kosher pot, and like I wrote in the caption that we ate the pasta in the end and whatever, but people were talking about like genocide, bombing children, you know, completely unrelated to anything in the context of the post. And again, like somebody wrote literally today that it's very obvious that the people who have been commenting are the problem and not me, because I didn't even mention, you know, anything of the sort in my video. So
yeah, they make those connections. I started a series of videos I want to continue about pogroms going like way back, and they started talking about Gaza, and I'm like, this is not at all relevant to this. And right. I feel like that's why when people say it's not about anti-Semitism, I think they're lying, because they always find a way to come back to it, even when you're talking about spaghetti. Like it's crazy to me.
It's just the fact that I'm Jewish and it's completely unrelated, and so I just want to ignore it, because I know that's going to happen. It's gonna like film my page, but at the same time, sorry to say, it's engagement, so it keeps pushing the video, and it will also reach good people who will comment like the comment I saw today, but also reach additional people who might follow me because they're interested in my content. So I leave it. And also I do want people to see the horrible comments, you know, like this is reality, this is what's happening. And also I do report and block people if they're actually following me, which happens sometimes. And I also really focus on the positive, that I'm very blessed with people who, are interested in Judaism and are passionate and want to share their support and respect and everything. And people do write to me and reach out. So the fact that I have this little niche of being the conversion consultant, I am blessed to hear people's stories, about how they are wearing a Star of David for the first time, or how they went to the synagogue for the first time, how they have questions about observing this or that and the other, and they want to reach out to me just because that's how I am on the platform. And I think that is something actually very beautiful that's happened as a result from October 7th. And I'm really honored that people will share and also take it upon themselves to do all these various things. So I feel like I accentuate the positive in order to help me also with dealing with all the anti-Semitism.
What is your favorite part about helping people explore their Judaism? If through conversion, through people who are Jewish, who want to become more observant, what is your favorite part about that?
What I like the most is the consultation conversations I have with people about learning a person's background, about why they even got interested in Judaism in the first place, and recommending them on their first journey, or the first steps for their journey, and kind of sending them off, because in Judaism we don't proselytize. So I never convince somebody what they should do. I just say, these are the options. I think I'll say sometimes people ask me, they say, what do you think makes the most sense? And I said, it depends what you want. If you want this, then that makes the most sense, whatever. But it's sending them off on their journey with the various options. And then, half a year, 8 months, 9 months later, getting an email that they either, that they started conversion or that they finished their conversion, all of those things. So it's being a part of people's journeys that is so powerful and meaningful. And just that first conversation where I send people off on their journey and just I don't know what's going to happen. How are they going to take this? What are they going to do? Is that's something that I really enjoy in guiding people on their Jewish journey.
What would be your advice to someone who's interested in becoming more observant? The first steps, so they're already Jewish. They're interested, maybe they heard something on the podcast or saw something on your video, and they're interested in exploring becoming more observant. What would those first steps look like for them?
So it's very hard for me to answer that generally, because it really depends on the person and who they are, where they're living, what their situation is. And there's so many factors to take into consideration. Do you have kids or not? Are you married or not? Who are you married to? Where do you live? Do you live in the middle of nowhere, or is there a synagogue nearby? All of these things really, really do matter. Somebody who was observant, whatever, they're living with their parents who aren't Jewish. So that obviously also makes it more difficult compared to somebody who is living on their own. Okay. So I would say talk to me, because I think that, each person's story is different. At the same time, what I would recommend is find the local synagogue and reach out to a rabbi, because through that you will also connect to a community, to services, to a class, and it just gives you a connection to additional people. And I do always recommend the book To Be a Jew by Rabbi Chaim Donin, and it is Orthodox, but I also have spoken to a wide variety of people who don't always do Orthodoxy, of course, but all have told me that it's very helpful to just getting the full picture of what Judaism entails, and then they can also say, this isn't for me, or I don't connect to this as much, and it just gives that, wide picture and just information, so that from there they can explore further what actually fits them. So that would be the two things I guess that I would recommend, or three things. So talking to me, finding the synagogue, and reaching out to a rabbi, which I know sometimes can be very difficult for people. It's wait, I just emailed the rabbi? And it's yes, you just email the rabbi, then you email them again, and then you call, and then you also might call their secretary as well, because the rabbis don't always answer, and it's not you, it's them. And so that's another recommendation, is don't be afraid to send an additional email or call, and start reading. So, yeah. So,
as I mentioned, you are my first guest who lives in Israel, and I want to talk for a second. I know you're a little crunched for time. What has changed in your life personally since October 7th? We don't have to make a statement about the Jewish people or Israel in general, but what has changed for you personally since October 7th?
So I think that I am more cautious and nervous, walking around. I'm very proud, and John will always wear a kippah no matter where we are in the world, but I am more nervous, especially with, having 2 kids now. And also say personally that my brother-in-law got badly injured as a soldier, an IDF soldier in the war. He had to go through a double lung transplant as a 23-year-old, and his life is now going to be forever different. Thank God he's on the mend. We spent Shabbat with him 2 weeks ago, and he is completely himself. It's just everything that's like physical. He has to gain weight, has to strengthen, etc. But, it's just, that's like changed our lives forever. For 3 months he was unconscious and he was sedated, and it was praying every day with my sister, who had to spend her first year anniversary of marriage when he was unconscious. So that really like changed my life. And I'm never going to look at the world or take anything for granted in the same way that I had maybe beforehand. And also I think it's just being very grateful for the IDF, for our nation, for the people, for our safety and for our home, because unfortunately a lot of people, we have 115 hostages in Gaza right now, and we pray for their safety and we hope that they'll be released soon, but that unfortunately we cannot take everything we have for granted anymore, which is a sad thing to say, and it just makes me even more have motivation to be Jewish and proud and protect ourselves, protect our family, protect our home, and do whatever we need to do.
Okay. Well, I'm glad that your brother-in-law is better. I saw posts about that, and
thank you.
It's I can't imagine having gone through that as his wife or sister-in-law, and it and what's interesting, speaking about the hostages, is I feel like my neighborhood is very Jewish, so there are posters everywhere, and I feel like even though I'm not in Israel where it's very obvious and they're all over, I feel like I know these people, and I'm explaining to people who don't live in my neighborhood that this has become such a part of my life, even though I've never even been to Israel and I don't know these people. I feel like I know them.
You have to come.
I know. Well, the problem is like back in the day, I was an actor, and I wanted to do Birthright, but I kept booking shows, and then I got married and we moved and we had no money. But yes, when things calm down a little bit, we have a good family friend who lives in Jerusalem with her 5 kids and a husband. They have like an in-law suite in the back, so I might utilize that at some point.
Yeah.
But yes, the idea is, and I guarantee if I get into this graduate program, I'm going to have to come to Yad Vashem and do some research. So it's a good excuse to come.
Let me know.
I will. We'll have to get together.
Yes.
So we're going to wrap up. So I do these questions with all of my guests. They are short form questions, like in the Actors Studio, which I don't know if you know what that is, but it was this television show where this guy named James Lipton would interview famous actors, and every episode he'd ask the same questions.
Oh, okay.
So it was, but these are my Jewish versions of the questions.
Cool.
So these don't need to be long answers. So what is your favorite Yiddish word?
Schmutz.
It's a good one. What is your favorite Jewish holiday?
Rosh Hashanah.
What profession other than your own would you want to attempt?
I think being a reporter. Yeah.
All right. If heaven is real and God is there to welcome you, what would you like to hear him say?
Like, good job. You thank you for making the world a better place. Yeah, I hope. That's what I would like to hear him say.
Yes. Is there anything else we didn't cover that you want to talk about, or something you want to plug?
So yes, I do have, so feel free to follow me on Instagram. I also have I have an ebook, Roadmap to Your Jewish Journey, which is on a website called PayHip, so you can find me Netta Jewish Educator. And I also teach, and you're welcome to reach out to me through Instagram as well about learning Hebrew, if you want to learn about family purity, anything Jewish related.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining me. This is Nicole Kelly, and this has been Shebrew in the City.
שמאחדת את כולם ומחזיקה עולם, יש מידה שבזכותה הכל קיים, כי זה כל האדם. הנה מה טוב ומה נעים, שבת אחים אחים שירו ביחד. אהבה מהנשמה היא התשובה, היא תנצח. אהבה מהנשמה sister, my